All right, all right. Thanks everyone for joining us today at the Launchpad. We're going to close out, and before we do so, we've shared a lot of different programs that our community offers in terms of our education system. So you got to hear from some of the more innovative programs happening here, including Willie Orozco with the Microsoft Teals program. You got to hear from some students, some local high school students. You got to hear from Dr. Lupe Diaz, who's the executive director of the Career and Technical Education Department here at Miami-Dade County Public Schools. And as we wrap up, I'm going to let my colleagues here introduce themselves. But really the call to action today, outside of informing the community on what's happening here in terms of the talent pipeline, is really getting a snapshot of how our local schools are fueling the ecosystem here. And I know I'm sure I don't speak just for myself when I share how important the network is, because you can train in skills. You really can't train. You can train in the art of networking, but in order to build a network, you have to be part of a community. You have to be welcomed into the community. And for me, one of the, I guess, identity crises I had in my day before fatherhood was tied to when I first got a computer science degree. I graduated with a CS degree, feeling like, what do I do with this now? And I think, as I think back as to what motivates me to remain active, present, trying to be a bridge in the community, it's some of those things I wish I had in high school, even in college. My career services department, I don't know about you all, really didn't do a great job at connecting into the community. So I'm going to let each of my colleagues speak, and this is going to be just kind of a reflection of the importance of getting involved in the community. So, Kumar, I'm going to have you share a little bit about yourself and maybe what you're passionate about.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I know it's been a long day. I feed off of energy, so I'm going to need everyone to say good afternoon back to me. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Okay, that's a little bit of my teacher side. So I am a lifelong educator and entrepreneur. In terms of what fuels me is this idea of community and connectivity. Obviously, when you look at me, I am a black woman, so the passion that I have for the black community, the passion that I have for being a woman is spoken through all the time. I have my brand. I'm a Black Woman, Yes, I Matter, which is a social impact brand. But I do want to talk a little bit about this idea in this sense of who was I as a child, and how did that fuel, and how does that fuel why I feel so connected to community. I'll tell you, I felt like an outsider my whole life. And to a degree, maybe I still do. I grew up in, three different places: Harlem, New York City, New Orleans, Louisiana, and the suburbs of New Jersey. And the town that I lived in was the town that Whitney Houston had her house in. So you could just imagine what the socioeconomic background of folks who lived there were. But the thing that was always clear to me was that I didn't fit in anywhere. So I was a lone black girl in my private school. I was a lone black girl in my town. But then conversely, when I would go to Harlem or when I go to hang out with my family in New Orleans, they'd be like, you're like no other black girl I know. You're different. You speak different. You're an Oreo. What's up? And so I never felt like I belonged, and I was always looking for a community. Instead of doing, I think what oftentimes happens in our society is trying to fit in, I just decided to boldly stand out and find out who I was outside of all of that and authentically be myself. And I think that carries through to how I am today. And when I decided to become a public school teacher, and I was a public school teacher up in New Jersey for 10 years, and people used to say to me all the time, I went to NYU Tisch on a scholarship, I got into Yale, I got into Harvard, and people would say to me, you're too smart to be a teacher. And I used to say, don't you want your smartest people to be educators? I'm confused by that entire statement. Why do we always have to be doctors or lawyers? Why can't we be educators? Why can't we go ahead and make sure that we are back into the classroom? But one of the main reasons I did that is, and I worked in urban environments, is I would have students say, Ms. Thompson, I never met a black person like you. I never met a black person who grew up in white neighborhoods, who was comfortable being around white people, who spoke like you. And I appreciate you. And a lot of those students to this day, and they're in their 20s and 30s, not to date myself, but they're in their 20s and 30s, and they talk to me still. They will hit me up on LinkedIn. They will send me text messages. They'll remind me of something that I don't even remember that we did. Like, oh man, that thing that you did. And I just keep thinking about the importance of representation. And that's what I think about community connection. When you're connected to the community, you're representing as your authentic, or if you're representing as your authentic self, you are a statement as to what can be. You are a walking statement of what can be everywhere that you go. And I am mindful of that all the time. And that's why it's so important to me to be connected to the communities in which I serve. I think of myself as a global citizen, but I have an affinity for here in Miami, Florida. And now I'll let Eric go.
So, Evan, just quickly before you jump in, because I want to set it up for you a little bit. Thank you, Kumara, for sharing. Similar to you in teaching 5th grade, after basically trying to figure out my career path, saw an ad, became a teacher, and just became fully passionate about kind of trying to pave that road behind me. And so another, I guess, environment or pathway for entrepreneurs around EdTech is EdTech entrepreneurs also tend to be, compared to other industries and verticals, you see a lot of Black and brown founders because of a lot of times EdTech in terms of social entrepreneurship and fixing some of the institutional challenges, you kind of feel a sense of accountability to do so. So I just wanted to set that up for you, Evan, as you kind of share, your pathway.
Yeah, it's a great point. So my startup's Kitty Credit. I'll explain what it does kind of in a second. But to your point, there's a lot of things that I didn't know early on when it came to my finances, right? I've always been an entrepreneur. I was the kid with the lemonade stand. Built a computer from scratch so I could burn CDs and sell them to my friends in high school. So the mindset around making money was there, but never really how to keep it. And for some reason, we have always separated the conversation around financial education from traditional education, and that makes absolutely no sense. Let's clap for like actually making financial education a thing, right? So, in terms
unless you mess it up, and then you got to learn how to fix it.
That's true. That's what I did. So Kitty Credit for me became a thing because I turned 18. I got that credit card right away, maxed it out, bought some Jordans that looked probably just like this, spent $150 on them after interest. They cost $500. Really looked back on a poor credit score and was like, 95% of this is absolutely my fault. But 5% I didn't really understand how it was. And then started to look at all the solutions that teach you around this concept. They're all corrective. Nothing was ever preventative to teach you about any of these types of concepts, right? So when I think about early education, I don't think about just what we learn. I think about how do we retrain habits. And that's essentially what we try to do with Kitty Credit, which is ultimately a chore tracking app that helps parents teach kids about credit by incentivizing productivity and rewarding good behavior. So missed chores or missed payments, the longer you've had a chore, like the longer you've had a credit card, anytime a kid's asking for something, it's ultimately like an inquiry. But it means a lot to me because, one, the younger generation right now is Generation Alpha, which is projected to have the greatest spending power in history, over $500 billion. And $500 billion mismanaged would be catastrophic. So when I look at this, I look at how do we get these kids early enough to where not only they start to take their education seriously, but their finances seriously, and how do we think systematically about making the conversation large enough to not just high school courses around financial literacy. We should be talking about these things in elementary school and middle school. Studies show between the ages of 7 and 9 is when you form your habits around money. So as an EdTech entrepreneur, to your point, Los, it's basically these causes matter to us. A lot of times we're speaking out on things that we want to see better because we don't want what happened to us to have happen to others. And when you're not necessarily growing up with adverse set of circumstances, you don't necessarily have to think that way. So I think that's why you see a lot of us show up in these type of verticals.
And so both of my colleagues here, Kumara, who last year we were here, and since then is now the vice chair of the STEM Advisory Board for Miami-Dade County Public Schools. So she answered the call, said, Kumara, I need some help. We need to do some things here. And sure enough, she did. And Evan, in his own lane, who's kind of tackling, as he's mentioned and talked about, the financial literacy crisis. One thing that stands out to me is a lot of times when I visit schools and we work with schools and we hear teachers and other stakeholders, they want 100% of the student. So I say to them, are you teaching 100% of the student? If we want 100%, we have to teach and reach them at 100%. And so the core areas that you've mentioned are part of this evolution of what our education system needs to be, holistic in nature, not only connecting them to the opportunities, but again, addressing the whole 100% of the student. As we close out, maybe you all each reflect a little bit on what that might mean to you.
I thought I wasn't going to get any hard questions. What happened?
Yeah, end of the day.
No. Well, I think, it is very odd when I think back on the educational system. And does anyone else think this? Like, boy, I went to math class. I went to English class. I went to French class or whatever. And then in your day-to-day life, it's not like, from 9 to 10, I'm only going to be doing math. And then from 10 to 11, I'm going to read it makes no sense, right? As human beings, we are doing things simultaneously all the time. And so I do think that what we need to do is do a true paradigm shift. But the way to do that is that you have to design. So everything that we're doing through here, even what just happened today, you coming in, the way that you had to register, that was a user experience that you went through. That was designed by the Emerge team and whoever else they bring in to design this experience for you. Today on the stage, Carlos for all day has decided and designed what the EdTech platform looks like. Schools were designed in the 1900s for a very specific purpose. And we have to be clear about what that purpose was. And the design worked. It was to really create people who could work automatically like they were machines without having to think in any real way, shape, or form, and just robotically do a task, do it well, do memorization. Well, the world has changed. We don't need those types of workers anymore. So what we need to do is actually, and this is where Kumar goes crazy, right? But we need to dismantle what we know of the public school system and of the systems in general, and we need to redesign them knowing what we know about human beings. What does it mean to be human-centered first? When you're talking about educating the whole child, you mean you're talking about educating an entire human being. This is the part I think we always forget about. Children are humans. They have feelings, they need to eat, they need to sleep correctly, and you don't know when that child comes into you at 8 o'clock in the morning. Can I tell a personal story? Is that okay? Okay. I'm going to tell, I don't know how much time we have, and because I'm an English teacher, I can't be loquacious, so y'all can stop me when you want to. But I'll tell you a little bit about why I have made a bit of a name for myself in the education space. So I was an English teacher, and I taught in urban schools, and I taught English. And in New Jersey at that time, students had to pass my class, all 4 years of English, and they had to pass the state assessment in English in order to get their high school diploma. And then students would have my class first thing in the morning. It would be 7:30 in the morning, okay? 7:30. So my class is generally considered one of the most important classes, but you're going to put in first thing in the day for teenagers who we all know cannot wake up by 7:30 in the morning and be productive. But not only do we know that, I then went and learned from my students, and because we worked in an urban district, a lot of my students were either the breadwinner or a primary contributor financially to the home. But they're teenagers. What kind of jobs can they get? Retail. Where's the retail? At the mall. This is New Jersey, at the mall. But they don't have a car to go to the mall, so they got to take 2-3 buses to go to the mall. So after school, they're doing the afternoon or night shift, which means they don't close until 10, 11 o'clock, which means they take 2-3 buses back, which means they don't get home till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. But you expect them to be there at 7 o'clock and then tell them they don't care about their education because they're not there by 7. That is a problem because you're not teaching to the child. You're not teaching to the human being and understanding what actually they go through and what they care about. And you're making assumptions because you can do it, they can do it. They're teenagers. And they're doing more than probably most of us did as teenagers, picking up their little siblings after school. Some of them had their own children, so some of them were parents, etc. I'm talking about high school. And until you thought about what it means to actually teach an entire child, a human being, the school system is not designed to do that currently. So what can we do as a community, as a society, to say, we no longer believe in that? We know that our children deserve more. We can give them more. So let's break down what we've got and start from scratch because they are awesome and they deserve the best.
Thank you, Kumar. Absolutely.
Got a little passionate.
Y'all really want me to say something after that? Like, what?
Well, we're about to do the keynote, so we'll be hanging around if you all want to see us again. The call to action is really to think about getting involved with the local community. I want to thank my panelists, Evan, Kumara. We'll be hanging around if y'all want to chat about it too. So thank you. See you tomorrow. Enjoy today's keynote.
Peace, everyone. Thank you so much.